how am I going to break down this divide in the fandom?
When analyzing the hatred for the current generation of Star Wars and Star Trek properties, it is pretty fair to say that most all of the issues are thrown at the feet of those who are in charge of the specific shows. The list includes, but isn't limited to, Mike Mahan, Michael Chabon, Gretchen Berg, Aaron Harberts, Rian Johnson, J.J. Abrams, and others. However, by far the two names that will constantly get repeated for the destruction of Star Wars and Star Trek is that of Kathleen Kennedy and Alex Kurtzman. It is said that these two people are either horrific filmmakers or they have no real vision to their respective franchises.
Hey Jesse, yeah, I'm not ever eating any of those brownies again.
E.T., Gremlins, Indiana Jones, all three Back to the Future movies, The Goonies, Who Framed Roger Rabbit, and over 100 other movies that you have either heard of or watched are all something Kathleen Kennedy played a major role in. Many of those, like the aforementioned E.T. and Back to the Future, also dealt with science fiction, giving some much-needed experience to the filmmaker. There's also rumors that she was very proactive in protecting those who worked for her, that she was in fact a great boss. Spielberg himself even said that she yelled at him when he was being too hard on the cast and crew, that she went to bat for those who needed it. But what about Alex Kurtzman? While his record isn't nearly as impressive, he was known for The Legend of Zorro, 2009's Star Trek, 2009's Transformers: Revenge of the Fallen, Star Trek Into Darkness, The Mummy, Eagle Eye, and quite a few television credits. He worked with J.J. Abrams, Ted Elliott, David Koepp, and many others that have helped shape what movies were in the 80s, 90s, and even today.
So they're good, and they know what they're doing, but did they bring a toxic left ideology to what you're watching? Kinda.
While the book The Fandom Menace Volume 1, A Fandom Menace Betrayed, will tell you that liberalism seeped into Hollywood and all other media like a virus, the uncomfortable truth is that film has generally always been left-leaning, even to the point of going so far as to be considered toxic in one form or another. The film industry would constantly push anti-government and often anti-conservative messages in its respective eras. This isn't necessarily surprising. You'll find that a lot of Hollywood had been brought up on the backs of immigrants, generally Jewish, from the 1930s and on. They often had to deal with quite a bit of bigotry, which, inaccurate or not, was most often attributed to the right and right-wing policies. The kings of Hollywood were the ones to hire their producers and directors, which in turn hired the actors, and in an interesting trickle-down effect, resulted in a left-leaning media experience. Now, to be fair, you can debate to what extent all of this would impact the movies. Additionally, government encroachment resulted in things like the Hays Code, which kept many movies center, if not right-leaning. And of course, McCarthyism would ensure the quelling of any dissonant thought. After these pieces of interesting United States history, Hollywood would still lean to the left, but the movies generally tried to push for the modern American heroes. The person, a man who would stand up for life, liberty, and the pursuit of justice. They would generally always get the girl unless they were a girl, which is a sad state of affairs if you ask me when it comes to history. Would have loved to seen some women getting other women. This formulaic methodology was chipped away slowly, but after the arguable defeat of the Christian values in the culture war of the 90s, and the rise of more leftist policies in the Democrat Party, media would begin to feel like it had taken a giant step backwards. The reinvigoration of Marvel, Star Wars, and Star Trek franchises saw a nostalgic excitement to those boomers and millennials that were now in the workforce. However, this media would be much different with a more diverse cast that some argued was, and still is, pushing an agenda. Many felt that the movies and series on the small screen were now advocating against what had made them great in the first place. They would also say that there was now an attack on strong middle-class white males, some of which may have believed in a higher power that is now frowned upon in some circles. Traditional values themselves, some argued, was under attack. The backlash against the type of media seen here wasn't insignificant.
Huh. Okay, I don't know if it was Treklad or Katwalski or who it was. Someone's dying today. Just give me the name of the YouTuber. I don't care how much they paid you. While I'm trying to get information out of him, we might as well go ahead and talk about the Fandom Menace?
The Fandom Menace's roots are actually pretty hard to trace. The earliest mention I could find of it was the Fandom Menace podcast, with its earliest page published on April 26, 2011. The last time the site was updated was May 8th, 2013. Unlike what is considered to be the Fandom Menace of today, the website seems to have fairly positive reviews of movies, with some of their members focusing specifically on wrestling. Their actual podcast no longer exists, so I can't really speak to what was on that. The next real notable mention of the Fandom Menace is in a comic by Dark Tower, the author and artist being John Kovalik. The comic series, which touts itself as something that is for people who have played Dungeons & Dragons, as well as anyone who has ever gone to a Star Trek convention, features its own version of what it calls the Fandom Menace. This can be found in Dark Tower's number 4, Fandom Menace. This comic, though, like the podcast, seemingly has very little if no connection to the movement we see today. In fact, I reached out to John, who states that there is no connection, that he never meant it to be a part of that. This comic, in contrast to what we see today, has characters that are beyond belief excited to see the Fandom Menace movie, with only a few of them being skeptical and trying to quell expectations. The main group, of course, doesn't listen and goes to the movie. It's somewhat left with a cliffhanger, actually. And to be honest, I wasn't really going to pay another $2 to see the resolution, as the title and artwork of the next comic lead me to believe that this was a standalone story. Unfortunately, I couldn't find the exact roots of the Fandom Menace as we know it today. I do know that its ranks were bolstered after the Phantom Menace came out in 1999 and the movie Star Trek 2009 coming out in, 2009. Both of these movies disenfranchised Star Trek and Star Wars fans alike, and they rallied against George Lucas and J.J. Abrams, respectively. In fact, the hatred would get so bad that George Lucas seemingly lost all passion for the art. He would say, and I quote, "Why would I make any more when everybody yells at you all the time and says what a terrible person you are?" Additionally, while there is no complete corroboration that I could find, it is largely believed that Lucas sold Star Wars for less than the property was worth. He did this because he just wanted to be done with all the stress that it entailed to do Star Wars. Of course, Star Wars under Disney would put it under the purview of Kathleen Kennedy, to which it saw a major expansion. These new films and series would focus on diversity and strong female characters. For Star Trek, the decision to put Kurtzman as the head of the property would see a similar, if not more pronounced, focus on these aspects. After this, the Phantom Menace would be in full swing and arguably at the height of its power. We would see channels like Nerdrotics, Midnight's Edge, Doomcock, and Mecharandom 42 gaining massive popularity and being able to impact opinion to a large degree. In fact, because of the growth of most of their channels, they would even be promoting other series like The Orville, getting to have interviews and discussions with people behind the scenes of various shows.
Originally, the Fandom Menace didn't seem all that out of touch. Star Trek Discovery Season 1, The Force Awakens, executives really seemed like they wanted to take a bite out of legacy Trek fans, especially the conservative ones.
The truth is, if you look at it from a third-party perspective, not coming in with any bias or nuance, both Star Trek Discovery Season 1 and The Force Awakens can actually feel like a complete about-face from the historical norm, giving legacy fans whiplash from all of the changes that had occurred. Even with the most charitable interpretation of what both Kennedy and Kurtzman were trying to do, and this is honestly being too gracious given some of the comments made by the cast and crew for Discovery, their attempt to correct historical wrongs and bring more inclusion into cinema and television was poorly executed and arguably insulting to legacy fans.
No, I'm not saying they shouldn't have done it, nor am I saying that they should have waited. It's just the communication and the way that it was done was horrific. Legacy Trekkers, especially conservative ones, had every reason to believe they were rewriting all of it, that none of it was going to matter. The skepticism was real, especially since Star Trek Discovery showrunners seemed to have no idea what Star Trek was, nor know about any of its lore.
Both showrunners of the franchises immediately tried to course correct without any build-up or any attempt to bring nuance. Discovery going out of its way to attack what it considered misogyny and bigotry by making the Klingons be a stand-in for Trump and his supporters. This mentality being minimized but still following into Season 2.
Okay, I think he's gone. Let's talk about Revenge of the Executives.